Take it away.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Farah Benarba. I'm an OBGYN, which, for those of you who don't know, means I'm a doctor who specializes in women, which I will talk about a little bit later. And I am with Valley Medical Group. My office is in Montvale, New Jersey. And tonight's presentation is called Just for Girls. So this is a presentation, I don't know if some of you have listened to this before, really focuses on some of the changes that are going to be going on in your bodies as you get older. I just want to kind of go over a bunch of things and then, obviously answer any questions that you may have. Okay, so we'll get started. So as I kind of mentioned, the goal for tonight is to go over all the changes to expect in your body as you get older, especially over the next few years. And besides just, knowledge and knowing what to expect and knowing how to try to help it, I also want to make sure you get comfortable in talking about these changes. There's a lot of things that will happen. It happens at different times, which I'll talk about in a second. But it's important to be comfortable to talk about these changes with whether it's your parents or friends or your doctor, just go in the future. And then, like I said, I want you to ask all the questions you may have, obviously about anything that I talk about tonight or any other questions you may have about any topics. I hopefully will be able to answer them. And most importantly, I want to try to have fun. Typically these were a little bit like interactive, which is difficult to do over virtual. So, definitely at the end, once I kind of go over everything, I definitely want it to be interactive, go over all your questions and try to have a little bit of fun, maybe make you smile or like chuckle a little bit. Okay. So as I said, everyone has their own unique timetables. So as you can kind of see here, girls typically start going through the changes of puberty somewhere between 8 to 13 years old. It really varies from girl to girl, from person to person. Girls are lucky that they start a little bit earlier than boys. And like I said, there's different parts to puberty, different things that happen, such as, growing your breasts, hair in places that you may have not had hair before, growth spurts, so suddenly you shoot up in height, even within a short period of time, and then ultimately starting your period at some point. The biggest thing I think, if you're going to take away anything from this lecture, is that the average timeline is your timeline. These are suggestions. These are things that we use to help figure out if things are proceeding in the normal way. But remember, everyone has their own timeline. Some of your friends may go through this a little earlier. It's unique for each person. And if you're unsure about what you're going through is, later or too early or something, it's important to talk to your mom or to talk to a doctor about it. Okay, so as I said, there's a ton of changes. Things we're going to talk about tonight specifically are, we're going to go over the female body parts because it is important for you to know what those body parts are called and where they are. We're going to talk about getting your period, what that means, what it is, how often to expect it, and how to deal with it, how to handle it. We'll talk about breast development. We'll talk about some of the changes that may happen to your body and your height. We'll talk about mood swings that can happen with puberty, how your hygiene may need to change as you get older, especially as, you start to sweat a little bit more, things like that. And then just some other kind of basic stuff. We'll talk about social media, which I'm sure you've heard about a million times, and you probably know more than I do. And of course, safe touch reminders, which we'll briefly talk about at the end. Okay, so the female body parts. It's really important to know kind of where these are, and also you want to know what they're called, as not only just for your own knowledge, but also if you're talking to a doctor or something or anyone, you want to have a good idea of like what they're called and what you're talking about. So the female body parts are located in the lower part of your belly, below your belly button. Okay, and there's kind of two parts. There's things that are inside, and then there's things that you see on the outside. We'll talk about the stuff on the inside first. So the first thing is the uterus, which is a very fancy term, but this is the womb. This is where babies are, and all girls have this. And then almost all girls are born with 2 ovaries. These ovaries have things called eggs. Eggs are little pieces of your genetic material that in the very late future, when you're ready, is what it gets released to form a baby. Girls are actually born with all the eggs they're ever going to have. So the moment you're born with all the eggs you're ever going to have, and that number decreases over time, versus boys who are a little bit different. The uterus connects to the outside of the body through the vagina, through the cervix and vagina. The vagina is a tube that connects to the outside, and you can actually see the opening down below. Okay, when you look, if you ever look below, girls have 3 holes. It's important to know that, and it's important to know which holes do what. So the top hole is called the urethra. Basically, this is where the pee comes from. This connects to your bladder, and this is where the pee comes out. Below the urethra is the opening of the vagina, okay? So the vagina is in the middle. The vagina and the urethra are surrounded by little, kind of like a piece of skin called the labia. And this is skin that's around the vagina that helps to kind of protect it. This is where you may start to notice some hair growing as you get a little older. And it's important to know the difference, because some people call this whole thing the vagina, but the vagina is actually this inside part. This outside part is called the labia and the vulva, okay? And then the third hole, as I'm sure you guys know, is the rectum. It's not really pointed out here, but it's below here. And this is when you have bowel movements or when you poop. This is where the poop comes out of, and this is connected to the inside of your intestines. So again, it's just good to know. I'm sure some of you guys have seen this in health class and stuff too. Just kind of wanted to go over some of the correct names for your own knowledge. So now that we know about the body parts, we'll talk about menstruation, which is a very fancy medical term for getting your period. The first thing to talk about is, what is a period? A period is when you have a small amount of blood that is released from the uterus down into the vagina, and you'll see blood. So it starts inside the uterus and comes out through the vagina. This will happen a few times a day, and it usually lasts for 3 to 7 days, depending on the girl and depending on the month. 3 to 7 days is typically about average. So when does your period usually start? Typically, it starts somewhere between the ages of 8 to 15 years old. Just so you know, usually it happens a couple years after you start to develop breasts. So breast development is usually one of the first things that happens when you start going through puberty, and you'll start to notice what we call breast buds. Usually when you start to see that, you can expect your period within a couple years. But again, as I said in the beginning, it can vary from person to person. Now, how often do you get your period? After a few years, it's typically once a month. The range is usually between 21 to 35 days, but again, it varies from person to person, and it can vary from month to month. Some people, 1 month it might be 25 days, some months it might be 30 days, and that's okay. In the beginning though, when you first get your period, and for those first couple years after you get your period, you may not get one every month, and that's okay. That's completely normal. It sometimes, you getting your period is, your brain and all the body parts are kind of maturing, and it takes some time for them to kind of get into a rhythm. So you may skip a couple months and then you might get it again. Again, that is normal for the first couple of years, but usually within a year or two, you should start getting a period about once a month. Now, once you start getting your period, and your mom or your parent may help you with this, but it's usually a good idea to start tracking it. Besides the fact that we want to make sure that you're getting it once a month, it just also kind of helps to know when to expect it, just for life. And now, in the old days, you used to do a calendar and to count the days. I don't know anyone that does that anymore. Really the most common ways are with all these different phone apps. And there are tons of different phone apps that help you. And basically, you just open one of these apps, you tell them when you get your period, you tell them the day it ends. And after some time of doing this, it helps you predict, usually within a couple of days, of when you're going to be getting your period. And most of them are free. They're on iPads and phones and stuff like that. But it's a good idea to use one of these apps just to track it for yourself. I think Flow is, I know, one that's really popular. The period tracker one, like I said, there's tons of different apps to use. And I don't think any one of them is better than the other necessarily. Okay, so what should you do when you get your period for the first time? So you want to make sure you talk to your mom or another grown-up that you trust whenever it happens. Okay, you don't need to go through this alone. It's kind of scary. You don't exactly know what's happening. You really don't expect it to happen. If this happens when you're at school, the nurse will help you or a teacher can help you. So just talk to someone like that and they can help, make sure they give you the things to help protect your clothes. But you just want to make sure you talk to someone you know. It may not always be your mom. I know for me, my mom wasn't home. My dad was the only person home, so he had to help me. But it's okay. Accidents happen. You may see that you get blood in your underwear or on your pants or something. It happens to everyone. I don't know one person who has never had an accident where blood can leak through their underwear or their clothes. And the good thing is that we have things, which I'm going to talk about on the next slide, to help collect the blood so you don't get it on your underwear. And this is what the teachers or your mom or the nurse can help you with. Okay, so there are a lot of different ways to help manage your period nowadays. And basically, you want to just have something in your underwear to collect the blood. So again, you're not soaking through your clothes and your underwear and having to change all the time, especially when you're going out, you're going to school, you're playing sports, you're seeing friends, you're doing all these things. You want to make sure that you have some of these things to help make sure you don't leak, because it can be uncomfortable too. The two most common things, and really the most common thing, are pads. So pads are kind of pieces of like absorbable tissue that sit inside the underwear. So they sit on the inside of the underwear that sits right under basically the vagina. And they're super absorbent. So any blood that comes out will get absorbed by the pad. Now, there are tons of different sizes of pads that absorb more or less blood. Usually you have to change it every few hours, depending on what day you're at in your period. And they have so they look like this, and then underneath there's like a little sticky film that you peel off and you stick to your underwear. And then when they're done, you just peel it off, throw it out, and then you put a new one on. The other one are tampons. So tampons is something I think most people start to use as they get a little older. May not be something you're going to start with right away, but they are similar to pads. They're kind of like a really absorbent tissue, but this actually sits in the inside of the vagina. And then you have a little piece of string that hangs out. So you put it in, and we'll talk about putting it in a few minutes. And then when you're ready to change it, you just kind of gently tug on the string and it'll come out, and then you throw it out and you either put a new one on or change to a pad or something. You also want to make sure you change these every few hours, and you definitely want to make sure you don't forget about them. You want to make sure that you don't leave them in for longer than at the most like 12 hours. These also come in different sizes, depending on how heavy your bleeding is. Now, again, I typically recommend that you start using these, either talk to your mom or another grown-up to put it in, because it can be a little uncomfortable. However, it really shouldn't hurt. So if you notice that when you're trying to put in a tampon, it really, really hurts, you need to make sure you tell your mom that or a parent that, and you need to talk to your doctor, because that can sometimes be a sign that there might be something going on. Nowadays, when back in my day, not that I'm that old, these other two things didn't really exist, but there's now called menstrual cups, which are kind of similar to tampons, but these are actually reusable. So they're kind of like a flexible material, and they kind of like a little cup. And you basically put them inside the vagina. This looks really big. I promise they're not actually that big. You kind of fold it in half, and then it sits inside the vagina, and it's basically like a cup, and it collects the blood. And then every so often you pull it out, you empty it out, you rinse it off, and then you put it back in. So this is something that's reusable. So you do have to empty it every so often, usually every like 6 to 12 hours, depending on how heavy your bleeding is. But they're reusable, so you don't have to throw anything out. And then nowadays, I would have loved this when I was younger. They have period underwear. So it's kind of similar to having a pad, but it's special underwear that has absorbent fabric in it that helps absorb the blood. So instead of having to go to the bathroom to change your pad every few hours, you can buy this underwear and wear it when you have your period, and it helps to absorb the blood. And they sell actually different types of underwear that have different, like for heavier days of bleeding and lighter days of bleeding. And then you just have to wash it and then you're good. They're not the cheapest, but you can usually, I've seen like you can buy like a 4-pack for like $40 to $50 depending on the brand. And now they actually sell them as like bathing suits too. So you can wear these to the pool or something and you don't have to worry about, you know, leaking or anything, because the bathing suit is actually meant to absorb the blood and help, you know, not really get affected by the water that you're in, which is awesome. Okay, so now that we talked about the bleeding, that is what your period is. It's this bleeding that you get once a month. There are a lot of other symptoms that come along with your period. It really depends on the person, and it can even depend on the month. But one of the most common symptoms, and you may have talked to your friends about it or heard your mom complain about it or something, are cramps. So cramps are when you get a really tight or squeezing sensation in your lower belly underneath your belly button. And these can happen a few days before and during your period as well. They're not fun, but they are easily treated. And we're going to talk about how to help make them feel better on the next slide. There are some other symptoms that you can have, which are normal symptoms to have during your period. You can have some breast soreness or tenderness. You can definitely notice some mood changes. So happy 1 second and then a few minutes later being sad. You may notice some bloating, feeling like you're full, being constipated, not being able to go to the bathroom, or even having some diarrhea. And you may notice food cravings, you're craving certain things. I don't know if you might have seen parents or older sisters or something like that, or even just being hungrier than you were before. And like I said, these symptoms are normal with your period. And your period is completely natural and normal. Every woman goes through it. And having some of these symptoms is expected. But if you are noticing symptoms that like your cramps hurt way too much and you're doing things to try to help them make them feel better and it's still not helping, you're missing school, you're missing the sports, or it's affecting your life, you need to make sure you let a grown-up or a parent know. Because you may need to see a doctor about it. And there are certain things that we can do to help make your symptoms a little bit better so you aren't missing school and you're not missing hanging out with your friends or missing your sporting events. Okay. So like I said, when you get your period symptoms, there are certain things that your mom or your parent will talk to you about to help make you feel a little better, kind of get you through it. The first is medications. So if you take things like ibuprofen or Advil or Tylenol when you're not feeling good, or if you have a headache, or if you have a fever, these medications also actually help with cramps and they can help make the symptoms a little bit better. Massaging kind of the area can help, especially using it with a heating pad. The heat can help kind of relax everything, makes everything feel a little bit better. And also with a heating pad is like warm baths and showers can help too. And then other things that just kind of make the whole process a little bit easier is obviously eating healthy foods, drinking plenty of water helps. Exercise, so you know that can be anything, it can be dance, it can be a sport, anything. Exercise can help relieve some of the symptoms. And then of course you want to make sure you're getting a good amount of sleep, because being tired can make some of your symptoms worse. So now that we've talked about your period a ton, we'll go over some of the other things to expect in your body, some of the changes that you may expect over the next few years. The first change is the breast. So we talked about this a little bit. The breast is usually one of the first things to develop, and is one of the first changes that you'll deal with puberty. They're called breast buds. And over time and over years, they'll grow to whatever size you may be. But it can take years for you to reach like your final size, okay? As they're growing, they can be sore, they can be a little tender. Bras can sometimes help with those symptoms, just help a little bit with the soreness. You may notice one side is a little bit bigger than the other. That's okay, totally fine. You may notice your nipples change a little bit of color, and all these changes are expected. You may also notice some hair growth. So one, you'll start to notice hair growth in areas you may have not really had hair before, being under your armpit and over what's called the pubic area. So kind of that bone that sticks out by your hip. or in the middle, which is part of your hip, you might start to notice some hair growth there. You may also notice that some of the hair you have already, so on your arms or your legs, get a little bit more, you might get a little bit thicker, a little bit darker. These are all expected changes. And then we talked about the growth spurts. So, you know, you will grow at some point. Typically, the growth spurts happen before your period. On average, you know, once you get your period, you can still be expected to grow a few more inches, but at that point, you may only, like I said, you may only grow another 4 to 6 inches at the most. So just, you know, for your own knowledge. But you can, you know, obviously you get taller. Also, your body shape changes, and it's different for every girl, but you might notice that the hips get a little bit wider, and you might notice a little bit more if you're gaining muscle and weight specifically in your hips and your upper legs. And that's considered normal for a woman. And then, of course, the thing everyone knows about is the skin changes. So as you start to go through puberty, your skin gets a little bit more oily. Some of the glands on your skin get activated, produce a little bit of more of that oil, which can make you prone to pimples and acne and breakouts. And we'll talk about how to handle that in a couple slides. But you'll also notice that you'll sweat a little bit more. And when you sweat, that sweat will actually start to smell. And this is a normal change. It's not a fun change, but it is a normal change. Okay, so speaking of, you know, sweating and oil all over your face and stuff, you want to make sure, you know, especially as you start going through these changes, there are certain things you'll have to kind of be aware of and might have to add to your routine, just to kind of take care of yourself. So first off, you know, you want to make sure you change your clothes every day. Now, I know being in a pandemic and especially doing a lot of things virtual, not everyone is doing that, which is fine, but you just want to make sure that you know, the body odor can stick to your clothes and you may not always smell it, but it can be there. So if you are going to be going out, you want to make sure you're changing your clothes pretty often. You know, some of the things, you know, I don't really have to go over, but you want to make sure you're brushing your teeth twice a day to help prevent cavities and things like that. You want to make sure you shower, okay, at least once a day. You want to make sure you're cleaning certain areas, specifically your face, under your armpits, near your groin areas, the areas where the sweat starts to accumulate to help eliminate those body odors. Okay, and speaking of body odors, if you haven't already, once you start going through puberty, you're going to have to start using deodorant because even though you may not notice it, you may have a body odor, and deodorant can help to eliminate or at least lessen the body odor. You're going to probably have to use deodorant at least once a day. My other piece of advice is now that you're going to start sweating more after you do any of like sports or something like that, you do want to make sure you shower and rinse off and change your clothes. One, because it helps to prevent some infections and also just make you feel a little bit better. And then shaving is really dependent on the person. You definitely want to make sure you talk to your mom or your parent about this. As you start to grow hair in different places, some people get a little self-conscious and may or may not want to shave. You don't have to shave. It's completely up to you and whether you feel comfortable doing it or not. I know some girls like to shave under their armpits or their legs, things like that. If you're going to, or you want to, have a conversation with your mom. Please do not borrow your mom or a parent or a sister someone's razor, because you're at risk for infection, not only yourself, but the person whose razor belongs to. So if you are going to shave, talk to your mom, get your own razor, and they'll show you how to do it to make sure you don't hurt yourself or cut yourself. Okay. And then just one piece of advice, you'll start to notice that you do have some odors and you may notice occasional odors down there. If that happens, talk to your mom about it or come talk to one of us, like one of your doctors or pediatrician or whatever. I don't recommend using these over-the-counter washes. They can make things actually worse. They can make the itching and irritation worse. And some of them are marketed to teenagers for like fragrance and stuff like that. But if you take anything from this lecture, please don't use these products. They cause a lot more harm than good. And to be honest, the vagina is self-cleaning. So you really don't need to use something like this. You can just use a mild soap on the skin part, like the groin folds. But these types of things cause a lot more issues. Okay. So as we talked about with skin, oil increases on the face and the scalp, and that can lead to acne, and you also have increased sweating. So this all can make you prone to pimples. Things to do, and some of you guys already know this, but you want to buy like some type of face wash. You want to make sure you wash your face. You may need to use an acne cleanser. I think something usually simple and mild, like Cetaphil or something, is really good to kind of start with. You don't want to pop or pick your pimples. And that is really hard to do. And even to this day, I am totally guilty of it. And if you do pick it, you'll end up with scars. Like I have one here, and they take a long, long time to go away. So please, as the best you can, best to your ability, do not pop or pick at your pimples. You want to make sure you use sunscreen. You will thank yourself later on, but you want to make sure you're preventing sunburn and other skin issues. So if you are, going outside every day, you should put on sunscreen, especially a little bit on your face, just for protection. You want to make sure you drink plenty of water. You want to try not to touch your face, which all of us should be doing nowadays anyway. Eating a healthy diet. So sometimes a lot of like fatty foods, or some people have certain triggers that can cause outbreaks in their acne. You want to make sure that you keep your hair clean, because you can, like I said, you can get oil on your scalp, and especially if you have hair that goes onto your face, or even you can be prone to pimples along your hairline. So you want to make sure you keep your hair clean, and you don't want it too much on your forehead. The other thing is you want to make sure you change your pillowcases. So not many people think of this, but you sleep on that pillowcase every single night. And I don't know how often some people change their pillowcases, but especially if you're not washing your face before going to bed, you can be rubbing all that oil and grime on your pillowcase, and every night you're just kind of rubbing your face in it. And it can definitely make you prone to some breakouts. So you definitely want to make sure you kind of change it pretty frequently. It doesn't have to be every day, but just relatively frequently. And then, of course, you want to make sure you get a good amount of sleep. It is normal to have breakouts. So it's sometimes almost you can't completely prevent it. It will get better with time most of the time. But if you're having any major issues, you can look for over-the-counter treatments for acne. A lot of them are pretty effective, but if they're not working for you, you may want to go see a dermatologist, who is a doctor who specializes in taking care of the face and skin. Okay. For mood swings, as we kind of talked about, you may experience some sudden changes in your mood, especially when you're going through or getting your period that time of the month. And they're normal. It's normal to, you might feel happy one second, sad the next minute. You might notice that people annoy you a little bit more than usual, or you have a shorter temper than usual. And that's okay. And it should be relatively temporary. Okay. But if at any point, if you are feeling sad or angry or worried all the time, and it's not just every once in a while, it's like pretty much all the time, you got to make sure you talk to someone about it, whether it's a parent or another grown-up or your friends. You really should talk to someone about it, and you might need to talk to a doctor about it as well. Okay. And then I've said this multiple times, but one of the biggest things that you guys can do for yourself to help keep yourselves healthy is having a balanced diet. There are tons of different diets nowadays, and there's all these different trends and stuff like that, and different things to try. And most of them, listen, if you want to choose to be vegetarian or vegan or something like that, that's fine. But you still need to make sure you have a balance in what you're actually eating. So maybe you don't get your protein from meat, but you can eat eggs if you're vegetarian, nuts, there's tofu, there's a lot of different other things to try to get a good amount of protein. You want to make sure you're eating a good variety of fruits and vegetables. You do want to make sure you're eating some grains or carbs. You want to make sure they're healthy carbs if you can try to, if you have a choice, like brown rice, whole wheat pasta, things like that. You want to make sure you're getting a good amount of dairy too, and some dairy has protein in it as well, which helps, like cheese and milk. And of course, you want to make sure you're active. So as I said, there's a lot of things that will be starting to happen, and you really shouldn't be afraid to ask questions, okay? Everyone goes through it. We may all go through it at different times and different rates, but we all go through it at some point. So you want to make sure you have people that you can talk to about it, whether that's just your friends, family members, other grown-ups, aunts, uncles, teachers, anyone, just someone that you trust who you feel like you can go to talk about any of your issues, okay? And we all go through it, so support each other. And speaking of supporting each other, you know, bullying nowadays, it's still an issue, especially online bullying. So, you know, if everyone's kind of going, you don't really know what everyone's going through. Someone may be going through a really rough time. It's important to be kind and be supportive. Being mean or rude, it doesn't help you. And saying those things, even if it's just for a laugh, it doesn't make you feel better. And it certainly doesn't make the other person feel better. So if you know someone that might be having an issue or might be bullying someone else, talk to someone about it, talk to a grown-up about it, or even talk to them about it and try to, you know, ask them why and see what's going on. And then social media. So everyone's on social media nowadays. Not only, you know, maybe not Facebook or things like that, but Instagram and Twitter and TikTok especially are super popular. And I know it kind of, you start to feel left out, especially if you're the only person in your group of friends or something not on it. So just for moms or parents, you know, a lot of you guys know this, and there's no right or wrong answer. But if you are going to have your child on social media, you know, you want to make sure there's a balance. And that's really hard nowadays with the pandemic and most things being virtual. You know, you want to try to limit screen time as much as you can, but realistically, that's hard to do. But you do want to try to at least make sure there's like social free media times or zones. So whether it's like dinner time or, you know, not the hour or two before you go to bed, you want to try to set some limits. And if your child is going to be on social media, it's not a bad idea to follow them or set the parental controls. And if they are going to be on it, you have to make sure you want to have those discussions with them, because social media can cause a lot of negative emotions, a lot of self-esteem issues. And you want to make sure that, you know, they're aware of this. And, you know, it's different than when we were younger. Things are definitely way different. So it's good to make sure you're able to have those discussions with your daughter. And then ultimately, guys, you want to make sure you take care of yourself. You know, besides just making sure that you're eating healthy and all that kind of stuff, you know, you want to make sure you have a good group of friends, you know, be proud of who you are, surround yourself with people who are supportive of you and not putting you down or anything like that. Giving back and doing things like that can make you feel really good about yourself, and can make you kind of feel like more of a community. And like I said, social media is not real life. So it's really easy to have that like fear of missing out or FOMO, especially when you're seeing things online. Just remember that most of the time it's a complete fabrication. It is not real, okay? And it's not a realistic depiction of someone's real day-to-day life. And then last but not least, and this is like the most important thing, is the like body safety, okay? You obviously, if anyone touches you or talks to you in an inappropriate way or in a way that makes you feel uncomfortable or in a place that makes you feel uncomfortable, you need to make sure you talk to a grown-up that you trust, okay? Also, you know, online, you may get text messages, you may get pictures, you may like have things sent to you that makes you feel really uncomfortable and things you don't like or don't want to see. And you have to make sure you talk to someone about it. Because the only way that we can help you is by you telling us about it. And you did nothing wrong if this happens to you. It is not your fault at all. But the only way that we can help you is if we know, okay? So that's it. We talked about a ton of stuff today. I know you guys probably have a ton of questions. I'm going to see if I can like change my view so I can actually like see if you guys are writing anything. But yeah, you know, this is an exciting time. It's, you know, it's confusing. There's a lot of emotions that happen. We all go through it at some point or another. And you will get through it. Is the biggest and most important thing. You will get through it. And one day you will be on this side and having to talk to girls that are younger than you. So please, if you guys have any questions, anything at all, moms, girls, whatever, definitely reach out. And of course, again, I'm at the Montville office. If you ever want to talk to a doctor or anything about it, I'm happy to see you.
Great. All right. We do have a couple questions.
Awesome.
So can you explain more about period underwear? Is it good for early developers?
Yeah. So, I think the period underwear is, they have different brands, and I know that they have different, like absorbencies. So for people who have really heavy days, like you might wear one pair for like your heavier days and different pair for your lighter days. I think it's a good idea. You just have to kind of make sure that, and they come in all different sizes too. So you should be able to find a size that works for your daughter or for yourself even. But they are really effective. You just have to make sure you wash them. Like I wouldn't let them sit in like the wash. Like you have to make sure you kind of wash them that day or the next day. That is kind of the one thing. But I think they're a great starting option for early developers. It's really easy. I would still talk to them about pads and stuff too, and always have pads on hand, because ultimately if the underwear starts to get kind of wet through, you're going to have to use something. But I think it's a really good option to start with, especially the bathing suits. I wish I had that when I was younger. And they do work well. I know my nieces have some and they love them. So I definitely think it's a good option, especially if they're really young.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Since periods can be erratic, how do you suggest dealing with them, dealing with periods that start unexpectedly during school? Should a girl wear a pad all the time to prevent embarrassing accidents?
Yeah, so I know that's hard. As I said, accidents happen. I would always make sure you have something on you. So whether that's pads or whatever, I would always make sure you have it. If you have like a locker, you're not at school really, but if you have a locker at school or something, I would maybe keep extra pads or something, or even like an extra pair of underwear there just in case. I don't recommend wearing a pad all the time. If you think you might be getting a period in the next couple days, yes, you can wear a pad just to make sure you catch it. But I wouldn't recommend wearing a pad every day, because it can definitely cause dryness. And especially if you're not bleeding, the material stays dry and it can over time be a little rough. It can cause irritation on the labia, like I was talking about, on that extra skin area. So I wouldn't recommend wearing a pad all the time, but if you think you might be getting a period in the next couple of days, it's not a bad idea. Like if you're having symptoms, it's not a bad idea. They sell what's called panty liners, which are really, really thin pads. That is not a bad thing to wear if you're not sure if you're going to be getting bleeding soon. So I'd recommend starting with that and having extra stuff just in case, but I wouldn't wear it every single day.
Thank you. What type of deodorant is best for me?
So I think it's really whatever you like. There's a ton of different deodorants out there. If you find that you're someone that has like really significant body odor, or you sweat a lot, like even if you're not active, you find that you're sweating, you might want to use something that's called clinical strength. So, and they sell them over the counter. You'll see like a little kind of message at the bottom. It's a little bit stronger and they last for a little bit longer. Most deodorants nowadays last for usually what they could say 24 hours. And they kind of come in a bunch of different scents. I know some people ask about the aluminum component in deodorant. That's a personal choice. I think using that type of deodorant is totally fine. I don't think there's really major issues with using deodorant. Actually, most deodorant doesn't have aluminum anymore, but there weren't really like a ton of issues. So I think it's whatever brand you like, and you can choose a scent you like too. That's actually kind of fun. You can choose like a scent that you really, really like. But my only piece of advice is if you find that you're someone who sweats a lot, you might want to use something that says clinical strength at the bottom.
Do you recommend period cups?
I think if you're someone if you use tampons without any issue, then I think a period cup is not a bad idea, because they depending on the type of person, they can last for a little bit longer, but it's a personal choice, honestly. They're not that expensive to buy. I think they're like, I have to check. I think they're like $18 last time I saw it, which is a little bit more expensive, but it's not that much higher than a box of tampons or pads either. And it's reusable. So, some people really like that option that, like, no matter what, if they have their cup, they always have something, and they don't have to worry about running out of pads or tampons. So I think it's a good option. I know a lot of girls that like using it. If you're someone who's conscious about the environment, it's actually a really great option because, like I said, it's reusable. So it's a personal choice. It's whatever you feel comfortable with.
Why do we need to drink a lot of water?
So water is really, really important. I'm sure you've heard of this in health class, but our bodies are like 70% water. When you get dehydrated, you can start noticing issues in your skin. You can start feeling tired. It helps to make sure that you are kind of like flushing out any infections and stuff like that. It's really important for your health. When I say a lot of water, I don't mean that you have to drink like those big liter bottles, multiple bottles a day. Okay. I have this bottle here. So it's like one of those like regular water bottles. And I'm going to be honest, I probably only drink like one of these a day when I'm at work. But it's easy to just have something like this, and you just want to drink a couple per day. Most people probably drink enough water. But if you aren't drinking enough water, that's when you start to notice you might have like worsening skin. You might feel tired more often. You might notice issues when you pee or go to the bathroom or something like that. So that's why it's important. And, if you're worried that you're not drinking enough water or you're drinking too much water, you should talk to a grown-up or talk to a doctor about it.
Okay. A couple more. So did you say that once you get your period, you are done growing, or you grow another 4 to 6 inches?
So that's an average. It really depends on the person, but typically the growth spurt starts before you get your period. And it can continue. So I don't know, I can go all the way back to the beginning to kind of show you that slide. But typically the growth spurt starts first and then can extend into like when you start getting your period. Here it is. But for some people, sometimes once you get your period, you may not grow a ton more. Some girls do, but they do find on average, you might grow another 4 to 6 inches after you do start your period.
Okay, we will finish with this one. This is a good one.
Okay.
How do you help your young daughter feel comfortable with the subject of periods, body changes, and talking about this stuff?
So I think initiating the conversation and being honest and upfront really helps. I'll be completely honest. I don't have kids. I have a 9-year-old niece. I tried giving this presentation to her last night and she flat out told me no. She did not want to hear about it. She knows what I do and she knows that I'm a doctor that takes care of girls. And she was just like, no, I don't care. I don't want to know. So it's not easy. Sometimes you do have to let them maybe come to you. But if you start to notice any issues, it's not a bad idea to kind of like gently prompt a conversation, ask them about it. Privately, obviously, you don't want to do it in front of other siblings or something, or, maybe in front of dad or whoever they're comfortable around. But I think being open and honest about yourself and what you went through is always a good place to kind of start. It kind of like makes them realize that like, oh, my mom went through this. She felt the same way. So, and then they might be a little bit more open to talking to you. But it doesn't always work. Sometimes you do just have to wait for them to come to you. I know my niece has come to me to ask me questions, but when you try to ask them, she just completely shuts me down. So, I wish I had an easier answer. I wish I had a magical answer for that of telling you how to do it. But I think it's kind of like a mix. You have to see how they feel and, just be upfront about your own experiences.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
I
love what you said about supporting each other and that we all have gone through this. So, that's a great comment.
Yes.
All right. So thank you